know now XML HTTP request is going to become a cross-domain tool. Okay? So you're going to be able to send XML HTTP requests from one site to another and use ambient authentication, meaning your session cookies, your basic auth header, your client-side SSL certificate, anything else that's like ambient. So we've got that technique going for us. Cross-domain request in IE allows us, in IE8, that allows us to send cross-domain requests. That won't have the ambient authentication capability, but it'll still allow us to scan another site. Okay, so there's two techniques. And the third technique is called post message. So post message is an HTML5 spec that's already been built into the some of the major browsers. So it's not gonna not get here. In fact, it's already here. So post message allows one domain to talk to another domain through JavaScript API directly, no network communication. So if you want to do anything on the server to prevent this, sorry. Okay, so this is a little bit of a disaster. Oh, and let's forget about implementation vulnerabilities. So their design is already screwed up enough, right? But then there's all these, every time we do something like this, there's always implementation vulnerabilities. So don't even bother, all these great hackers, I'm sure there's not going to be anything wrong with it. Okay, so here's an email from Thomas Russler, who's kind of our contact at W3C for Owasp. And here's him saying, post message is a terrible idea because the API of post message encourages developers to have terrible practices. Okay? So the way you send a message from one site to another is you send the origin that you want to send it to, the domain that you want to send it to, and you send it the message. And the message itself is a string. So what do you think a developer from Facebook and a developer from MySpace are going to do if they want to send structured data to each other and they have to use a string? How are they going to do that? Anybody? JSON. Yeah, JSON. So what is JSON? JSON is just JavaScript. Okay? So sites are going to be sending JavaScript to each other, and they're just going to be evaluating other people's JavaScript. Sound like a good idea? Absolutely not. Okay, so we've got shared security through XML HTTP request, and we've also got shared security through post message. So things are looking pretty bad. So of course the fix for this would be to allow the JavaScript, on the two different sides to be able to send structured data to each other rather than just a string, and they just don't seem to be listening to us. But we're working with them rather than like opposed to them. This is one of the things we're doing with the intrinsic security working group. So we'll keep you updated. This is an example of using post message in a browser. So you add a listener for listening to messages. So you check the event.origin, and if and this is what you're supposed to do. You check to see if the origin is the origin you intended to receive it from, and if it's not, you're supposed to return. So guess what developers are going to do when in QA and dev the origins are different? They're either going to forget to implement those checks, or they're going to implement them wrong, or they're not going to even know about that they're supposed to do the checks. Okay, so we should have some kind of data binding approach where we can say this function receive message is bound to Facebook.com. Okay, and then we can't have all this cross-origin craziness going on. But that's just not the design right now. But the draft is not final, so we're still working. Okay, so again, all that was just we're still talking about how we can what are the techniques we can use to go across domain. So there's also these well-known worm techniques for scanning. So hitless scanning. Hitless scanning is the idea that the initial growth stages of a worm are really slow. Okay, so in the first hour, Sammy only had 25 people or something. So it's really slow during that first period. What if Sammy personally infected 50 profiles first? At the same time. By the 18 hours, he would have had everybody on MySpace. Okay, so this is that idea of you seed it 50 times, and then you're kind of overcoming the initial slow growth rate, so you jump right to the exponential goodness. Okay, permutation scanning is another technique, meaning basically if the worm nodes have this way of automatically figuring out if a certain site's been scanned, and then it can go and do the next site. It's not going to duplicate effort. So this is something that's possible that worms aren't doing now. Topological scanning, not possible today, but going to be possible in the future. Okay, so the same techniques we have for sending reconnaissance, scanning other sites, we can use those same techniques to attack, to launch our attacks. So there's not really too much of a difference here. So the question becomes the likelihood that we can actually have a cross-domain jumping, cross a scripting worm is directly tied to how likely it is you can find a store across a scripting attack in a black box scan. I personally couldn't tell you what the odds are because I don't work for a black box scanning company, but I have a feeling, at least their marketing people would tell you it's pretty possible. So I'm sure it's possible, but how possible is it? Even if we're looking at 5% of sites or 1% of sites, we're still talking about millions of sites out there. Okay? So as soon as we find one, we can push patches out to our worm, and I'm going to talk about how we're going to do that. Okay, so polymorphic JavaScript. Polymorphic JavaScript is this idea that we can take JavaScript and make it look like nothing it was supposed to look like. Okay, so then it becomes really hard to signature. Okay, so here we got a couple examples. Billy Hoffman is like the king of this stuff. He's like my hero. So you look at his research if you're interested in it. But basically the idea is we can obfuscate JavaScript so that it's hard from one profile to another to try to signature the attack. Okay, so if I wanted to clean up after a worm, it's difficult because the JavaScript in one profile looks nothing like the JavaScript in the next. But jump ahead real quick. No, I can't. Okay. So we'll come back to. There's a minor flaw in that argument. So I'm kind of summarizing, by the way, like popular debates we're having within the security, worm discussion community. So I'm trying to present all sides of this. Okay, so communication between worm nodes. How are two browsers going to communicate? I don't think they ever will, unless we have the stupidest plugin ever that could do it for us. And even if you could have node-to-node communication, there's no way to mutually authenticate. Like some of the work they did against the storm worm, which was a peer-to-peer worm, is the good guys sent messages that said, hey, self-destruct please, and the worm nodes were like, okay, self-destruct. Right? So to prevent that, you need mutual authentication. And there's no way to do that with two worm nodes. Okay? Because neither of them can be sure that the other is really a worm node and not a good guy. So command and control. Okay, so this is one of the cool things that I wanted to introduce today. So again, the old way of doing command and control that actually nobody ever even got to do was worm would call evil.js, okay, and then as the attacker found more and more vulnerabilities, he would bake them into this evil.js that he controlled. So as time went on, evil.js would be the latest and greatest copy of the worm. But again, there's problems with that centralization. So the problem I wanted to solve was how can we make command and control structure without running into this problem of centralization. So I came up with a distributed XSS worm node command and control structure, which is really too long and absurd of a title. Okay, so I forget what this slide is about. Okay, so this is the old way. We use remote scripting to a central place. So that's busted. Don't like that. So here's the scenario. The attacker goes out to all these different places on the web, and he quietly posts a bunch of signed JavaScript payloads. So yes, signed